It was an ordinary day at a luxury car dealership in Moscow, Russia, when a chance meeting between former UFC champion Khabib Nurmagomedov and an arrogant manager turned into no one expected. The manager, full of pride and quick to judge, never expected the lesson Khabib would teach him, and to all who would witness it. It wasn't just about luxury cars or money. It was about respect, humility, and the quiet strength of a champion who had nothing to prove until the moment when it mattered most. Stay tuned as we walk you through this unforgettable encounter that will remind you why true strength is not about power or status, but about standing up for those who need it most. You won't believe Khabib's reaction. It will stay with you long after you hear this story. What do you think Khabib did after being so publicly insulted? Could he have knocked out the manager or instead decided to teach him a powerful lesson? If you're curious, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel to see even more powerful content. It was a bright and sunny afternoon in Makhachkala, the capital of Dagestan, Russia. The air was fresh, and the streets were lively, filled with people going about their daily business. In the heart of the city, Khabib Nurmagomedov, the undefeated former UFC champion, had just finished an intense workout. Known for his discipline and work ethic, Khabib has spent the last few hours honing his techniques, working harder than ever. With a few hours of free time ahead of him, he decided to treat himself to a rare moment of relaxation. Khabib was no stranger to luxury, but his tastes remained simple, favoring utility and practicality over pampering. On this day, however, Khabib decided to visit a local luxury car dealership that boasted an impressive collection of high-end cars. The car showroom was a modern building with sleek glass windows reflecting sunlight off its polished surfaces. Inside, the showroom was meticulously organized, and the atmosphere buzzed with a sense of exclusivity. Expensive cars lined the showroom floor: Lamborghini, Ferrari, Rolls-Royce, and other brands that exuded power and prestige. The showroom was filled with well-dressed customers, some of whom were already immersed in conversation with the staff. Khabib entered the car showroom with his usual calm, collected demeanor. When he stepped over the threshold, several employees turned their heads, some recognizing him immediately. However, there was one person in the car dealership who didn't recognize Khabib at all: the manager. The manager, a brash and overconfident man, looked up from his desk and noticed Khabib's entrance. Judging by his plain clothes, the manager assumed that Khabib was just another visitor without the financial means to even dream of buying one of the luxury cars for sale. With a smug smile, the manager decided to approach him. His attitude was excellent. Khabib was dressed simply as usual, disregarding his ostentatious appearance, and the manager thought it would make communication easier. He would be the one enlighten this ordinary customer about the finer things in life. As Khabib wandered around the showroom admiring the cars, the manager kept his eyes on him. Sensing an opportunity to confirm his perceived status, he approached Khabib. His tone was full of condescension. "Can I help you find something more suited to your style?" he asked. His voice was full of arrogance. It was clear that the manager was making assumptions about Khabib's taste and his ability to such luxurious cars. He assumed that someone like Khabib, modest in appearance and manners, could not have the means to buy one of the extravagant cars that adorned the showroom. The remark hung in the air like a challenge, but Khabib remained completely unfazed. His facial expression remained neutral, and he nodded politely, not entering into the conversation just yet. But the manager wasn't done. He couldn't resist inserting a few more remarks, subtly mocking his simplicity and unassuming appearance. As he walked beside him, he commented that such expensive cars were not very suitable for a man with a lifestyle like yours, suggesting that perhaps Khabib should settle for something less extravagant. Khabib, still calm and poised, didn't respond to any of the manager's taunts. He simply continued his tour of the car dealership, keeping his thoughts to himself. However, while the manager continued his attempts to belittle Khabib, there was a change in the air. Something was about to happen. Khabib's patience, known for being almost unwavering, began to wear thin, and yet he said nothing. The manager, emboldened by his earlier remarks, continued to circle around Khabib, unaware of the storm brewing behind his calm exterior. His condescension grew more and more acute as he was trying to assert his dominance, convinced that the simple, humble man in front of him had no place in such a luxurious showroom. As they walked through the rows of high-end cars, the manager couldn't resist continuing his verbal banter, still underestimating Khabib based on his quiet and humble nature. "You know," the manager said dismissively, "cars like that aren't for everyone. They require a certain taste, a certain appreciation of luxury. Not everyone can appreciate the craftsmanship and prestige that comes with owning such a car." He pointed to a sleek black Rolls-Royce, the epitome of sophistication. "If you're just browsing, you might want to look at something more affordable," he added with a chuckle, as if trying to make Khabib uncomfortable. Khabib, who had been silently watching the cars, sighed slowly, but his face didn't change. He had been in situations like this before, where people had judged him based on his appearance and behavior, believing him to be unworthy of certain privileges. But at that moment he had chosen to remain silent, not to stoop to the level of a manager. It was a strategy that Khabib had honed over the years, enjoying the moment, not reacting hastily, staying focused in the face of adversity. The manager, sensing his continued superiority, decided to push even harder. "I doubt someone like you can afford something like that," he said dismissively, pointing to the Rolls-Royce. "Maybe a used car would fit more into your budget. That way you won't be disappointed." He spoke louder now so everyone in the showroom could hear his comments. He thought he was putting Khabib in his place, but really he was just making a fool of himself. But Khabib didn't react. He stood there looking at the cars as if the words were unheard. The more the manager spoke, the more he revealed his true character, not realizing that he had already crossed the line. Khabib had faced this kind of disrespect his entire life, especially when he was climbing the ranks in mixed martial arts. He was used to people doubting him based on preconceived notions and superficial judgments. However, he was always above that, proving that actions spoke louder than words. When they reached the high-end section of the showroom, where the most exclusive cars were displayed, the manager's arrogance reached its peak. He leaned over to Khabib, trying to make one last remark. "This," he said, pointing to a rare Lamborghini, "just what you might need. A car like this is for those who really understand the meaning of luxury, for those who have already arrived. But," he added with a wry smile, "you should probably settle for something less flashy, given your—" At that moment, the atmosphere began to change. Several customers and employees who had been silently watching the exchange now began to shift awkwardly, sensing that something was about to happen. Khabib remained motionless. His attention had been unwavering as he admired the cars, but there was a perceptible shift in his energy. He hadn't responded yet, but his calm presence became more like a quiet storm ready to break. Then, with a movement no one could have predicted, Khabib turned toward the manager. His eyes, though calm, took in the man with an absolute clarity of gaze. Without a hint of hesitation or anger, Khabib said, "I'll take it." His voice was even, low and deliberate. He pointed to the very Rolls-Royce that the manager had tried to push him away from, a car he assumed was beyond Khabib's means. The manager blinked, caught off guard by Khabib's response. His mouth went dry for a moment. Without giving the manager time to think, Khabib continued, "And I'll take the two next door, and you'll deliver them to my house tomorrow. Full payment in advance. I don't need financing or any deals." Khabib's words were firm, without a hint of braggadocio or bravado, just simple, unwavering confidence, as if the decision had already been made long before he entered the showroom, and this was simply a moment of fulfillment. There was a stunned silence in the showroom. The manager, who had spent the last few minutes mocking Khabib's choice and suggesting that he was out of his depth, was now completely at a loss for words. His arrogance evaporated in an instant, leaving him standing there in bewilderment. The staff watching this entire interaction exchanged glances, unsure of how to react. The power dynamic in the room had changed dramatically, and the manager was no longer the dominant force he once thought he was. Khabib, now completely unaffected by the manager's previous outburst, turned his attention to the sales department. With a subtle gesture, he made it clear that the deal was to be concluded without further delay. "I'll wait for the paperwork," Khabib said. His voice was calm and businesslike. The staff, now clearly aware of who they were dealing with, immediately sprang into action, rushing to prepare the necessary documents. The manager, whose former smugness had been replaced by an expression of complete humility, froze. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to make sense of the situation. He had been so confident just a few minutes ago, so convinced that Khabib didn't belong in a place like this, yet now he found himself in the position of someone who needed to prove his worth. Not to Khabib, but to himself. The showroom buzzed with quiet whispers, but the manager's attention was focused solely on Khabib, the man who had silently but powerfully flipped the script. As the sales team rushed to prepare the paperwork and finalize the deal, the manager stood back. His head was spinning with disbelief. Events had unfolded so quickly that he barely had time to realize what had just happened. He had entered the interaction with an inflated sense of superiority, assuming that his position and status at the car dealership would give him the right to fire Khabib. But in an instant, his assumptions were shattered. The change was so drastic that the manager could barely come to terms with it. He had been so sure of his judgment, so sure that someone like Khabib, dressed simply and modestly, couldn't possibly be interested in the most exclusive cars in the car dealership. And here he was, watching the very man he had ridiculed make a major purchase, a purchase that left the manager in the shadow of his own arrogance. Khabib continued to work on the details of the sale. His demeanor was completely unaffected by the manager's embarrassment. The contrast between the two men could not have been clearer. Khabib's quiet strength spoke volumes. While the manager was floundering, trying to regain his composure, Khabib remained grounded and collected, the very embodiment of confidence without ego. He didn't need to prove anything. His actions had already done it for him. After a few minutes, when the paperwork was almost complete, the manager realized he needed to deal with the situation. His sense of pride was hurt, and no matter what, he felt the need to apologize. His face flushed as he nervously approached Khabib, the man who had just humiliated him, without saying a word in retaliation. The manager cleared his throat awkwardly, and Khabib, sensing his hesitation, looked up from the papers with a hard, I owe you an apology," the manager muttered, his voice low and uncertain. He was no longer the arrogant man he had been just a few minutes ago. The confidence that had once characterized him was gone now, replaced by a humble one with a sense of remorse. "I underestimated you. I treated you badly based on assumptions I had no right to make." The words seemed foreign coming from him. His usual bravado was completely absent. "I hope you will forgive me for the way I spoke earlier." Khabib looked at the manager for a moment. His eyes were calm, but full of quiet understanding. There was no anger in his gaze, no desire to make the situation worse, or make the manager feel worse than he already did. Instead, Khabib simply nodded, accepting the manager's apology without giving it much. "It's okay," he said. His voice was calm but firm. "It happens. But remember, everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are or what they look like. You should never judge someone based on looks or assumptions. We are all human beings." The manager's face softened as he absorbed Khabib's words. It was clear that he wasn't just apologizing because he felt obligated. He actually learned something in that moment. He expected Khabib to be angry, perhaps demanding an explanation or making a scene. But instead, Khabib responded with grace and dignity. The true power of Khabib's response was not in his ability to buy cars or assert financial superiority. It was in his choice to rise above the manager's rudeness without sinking to his level. The manager now realized that humility, not aggression, is the mark of a true champion. As the manager stood there, still trying to comprehend the lesson he had just learned, Khabib continued to complete the transaction, but the impact of the moment was far from over. The other customers and staff who had been silently watching the exchange now treated Khabib with even more respect. It was clear that they had just witnessed a demonstration of character that transcended wealth, status, or material possessions. Khabib had shown them that true strength lies not in a demonstration of power or status, but in how one behaves in the face of disrespect. The manager, now completely humiliated, found himself reflecting on Khabib's words long after the deal was finalized. He had walked into that showroom, believing that his position gave him the right to judge and humiliate others. But in the end, it was Khabib's quiet dignity and strength that left a lasting impression. He learned through bitter experience that judging based on appearance is not only unfair, but also reflects one's own weaknesses. When Khabib walked out of the car dealership with his newly purchased vehicles, the manager looked after him, head slightly bowed in quiet admiration. He saw the former UFC champion's strength and power, not in the cars he bought or the money he spent, but in the way he handled the situation with such calm, unwavering confidence. The lesson was clear. True strength comes not from dominating others, but from remaining humble and composed in the face of adversity. Khabib reminded him, and all who witnessed the encounter, that true strength comes from how one treats others, even when they try to undermine us. When Khabib's car purchase was completed and he walked out of the car dealership, the air was full of reflection. The staff who witnessed the entire exchange couldn't help but be surprised at how the situation unfolded. They were expecting a scene, perhaps a confrontation where the outsider would stand up for himself, but instead they witnessed something much more powerful, a quietly dignified response that plunged the arrogant manager into humiliation and the entire room into awe. Khabib decided to rise above the insults with a show of strength that came not from wealth, power, or status, but from character and self-control. The manager, still standing in the exhibition hall, was alone with his thoughts. He had come to realize the true meaning of humility, not as a concept, but as something he had just experienced firsthand. He had assumed, based on Khabib's humble appearance, that he was someone who didn't belong in such an exclusive environment. But in the end, Khabib proved that humility was more than just appearance. This is how one behaves when faced with disrespect and condescension. Khabib didn't need to flaunt his wealth or brag about his accomplishments. He simply showed respect for himself and others, and in doing so, taught the manager a lesson that will stay with him forever. For employees, the incident was a reminder of the importance of treating others with kindness and respect. They saw firsthand how a person's character can change the course of an interaction. Khabib never raised his voice, demanded special treatment. He was just being himself, a man of integrity and patience. In that moment, they realized that true leadership is not about demonstrating power, but about embodying values that inspire others to act with respect and kindness. The way Khabib handled the situation taught them more than any textbook lesson. As Khabib left the car dealership, the tense atmosphere began to calm down, but the repercussions of his actions were in the air, making everyone in the showroom think. They realized that sometimes the most influential people in a room aren't the ones with the loudest voices, but those who quietly stand their ground with unwavering confidence and grace. Khabib's lesson wasn't just for the manager, it was for all of us. It was a reminder that strength is not about arrogance or humiliating others in order to rise up ourselves. True strength lies in how we treat others, even when they try to undermine us. Khabib showed that even in the face of humiliation and disrespect, we should not stoop to someone else's level. We can stand up straight, remain calm, and maintain our dignity. By doing so, we not only preserve our own integrity, but we inspire those around us to do the. This unforgettable encounter will forever be remembered as a powerful lesson in humility, grace, and quiet strength. Khabib's response to the manager's rude treatment not only changed the way the manager perceived him, but left an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. It was proof that the true measure of a man is not in the wealth he possesses, but in the way he behaves and treats others, regardless of the circumstances. And as the manager and staff continued to reflect on the day's events, they realized that the most important conclusion was simple. Respect is something we must earn by offering it to others first. Khabib's humble actions spoke for themselves, and it was the most powerful lesson of all. What an unforgettable display of strength and humility from Khabib. His response taught everyone in that car show, and all of us who watched, a lesson we won't soon forget. So what's the conclusion to this? It's not about how much you have. It's about how you behave when faced with disrespect. Khabib didn't need to prove anything by force. His character spoke louder than any punch. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like this video, share it with those who need to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that remind us of the true meaning of strength. True meaning of strength. True meaning of strength.